Hey y'all. If you can't show up fully with your partner, who can you show up fully with? This is a really fascinating thing that I notice in couples quite often of, because people have the impression that their relationships are quite fragile, the person that in theory they would show up the most fully with and just like be full on authentic with, they actually happen to be the least authentic with, and it's the person they most try to conform to, what it is that they want and need instead of fully accepting their partners either, which is a fascinating dynamic, right? Because it's not only are you willing to speak the radical truth, it's also are you willing to hear the radical truth from your partner. And this creates a really amazing dynamic in a relationship that most people are not willing to go into. I remember several extremely radical situations in my own relationship that will highlight this. One of the first ones, when my husband and I were first together, like within our first, I don't know, 6 months or something, he actually said, "I love you" to me after, I don't know how long it was, a couple of months. And I closed up like a clamshell. Like I was kind of like, I'm not ready to say that to you. Like I don't know if I don't know. I don't know if I can say that out loud and whatever. And instead of, he could have very easily, backed off and stopped saying I loved you, or he could have backed off and said like, oh, like she's not on board and she's not in the same place I am. So, I need to take a couple of steps back. But actually, what happened is that he just totally fully accepted it and said, that's fine. Like, don't say it until you feel like you're ready to say it. And that was the permissiveness of that was like radical for me at this time. This was like 12 years ago. And so, the codependence that I had had in my previous relationships pretty much dictated like that it was not okay for me to, speak radically honestly. And it wasn't okay for me to, have my own sovereignty essentially even. um and so I was like really blown away, and I think that that was one of the things for me that really solidified like, oh, like this man is actually here to like show up and like, be in a partnership with me, and he's not going to, try and force me into anything that I don't feel like I want to do or I'm not ready for. And so that was one example, and then some more radical examples actually were, this I feel I feel some massive vulnerability in sharing this. Um, yeah, but I'm going to, because it feels really important for me, because I've seen and I've talked to so many clients and people that have been in my masterminds around this topic of, what what are you willing to say to your partner? And I've even noticed that minimal, what I'm going to share is actually super massive and like probably could have completely taken down our relationship. I know it could have. Two examples that I'm going to share with you actually. But even what I noticed is that people are terrified even to say small truths. And so my question is like, where is the fine print in the rules that people believe like I can't speak the truth to my partner, because if I speak the truth to my partner, what's going to happen? A lot of people think that, one, their partner's going to get really pissed off at them and they're not capable of actually handling that. Two, they believe that it just totally went out of my mind. I'm in this really interesting headspace today. um, yeah, so they believe that their partner's going to get really upset with them and they're not going to be able to handle it. The second thing, they think that their partner's going to get really upset with them and potentially like, cause massive waves in the relationship and make their lives insufferable. Or three, they think that their partner actually might leave them if they show up and radically, speak the truth. And I definitely had those things as well. But the first example I want to share with you is, my my husband and I experimented a little bit with something like an open relationship. We had our own, boundaries and rules and engagements. And I went to a Tantra retreat and fell completely, deeply head over heels for another man. This was years ago. And when I came back, a lot of people that I've told this story are like, oh my God, like, I can't believe that I feel like it's really dark in here. I'm going to turn on another light. So people said to me, like, I cannot believe that you actually like just got home and immediately told this to your husband, because what they were thinking is like, oh my God, I probably would have mulled over it for a couple of days and like really wanted to like hide it from him because I don't know how he's going to react, and like hemming and hawing and but I showed up and I immediately told my husband. I said, I need to talk to you. We need to find, a private space to have a conversation. And I said, I fell really deeply in love with another man. I said, I did not cross any of our boundaries. I didn't cross any of our agreements, but I fell completely in love with this other man. And his heart was destroyed. I mean, like completely. He told me he like viscerally felt it and had never felt that much pain before in his life. And I really literally, like in that moment, I thought that was going to be the end of our relationship. Because even though I hadn't crossed boundaries that we had agreed upon, the pain that he felt from it was massive. And he left, at that time we lived and worked at a resort together in Costa Rica, and he had days off. So he left for 6 days, like right that afternoon, I think. And I did not hear from him for the 6 days that he was gone. And I pretty much was in a space of like, okay, this is over. And yet at the same time, for me, it was a matter of integrity, of speaking the truth. Because if I am not showing up and speaking the truth, then what is the basis of our relationship anyway? And so, one of the things that I just really feel important to share with this is, if you trust that your relationship is important to you and you believe that your relationship is important to you, for me, like speaking the radical truth is just a way, it's almost like a love poem. It's like saying a love poem to yourself, because what we think of as like, what is kind, or our perception of, what is compassion for our partner, or, what is compassion for ourselves because we don't feel strong enough. Like, this is speaking the radical truth to your partner is like speaking a love poem to them. It's like speaking to them in the language of your essence, of who you are and what it is that you feel like you need, or showing up and saying like, I fucked up. Like, I'm sorry, or you don't even have to say that. Maybe you want to say that, but I fucked up, and this is exactly, sorry, my battery was getting low. I fucked up. This is what was happening. And, I feel like I need to speak this out loud to you because, this is one of our agreements. Like, if we're going to be in a dynamic relationship and I actually love you, the only thing I can do is speak the truth. And the truth is, it's a channel. It's a way. It's a channel for me to share my self-expression with my partner. So the next radical thing that happened, that this one feels even more vulnerable to share, and again, like I feel like it's necessary so that I can communicate to people. Like this is massively, like way massively more severe probably than any of the things that you are not willing to share with your partner. Because a lot of the things that people are not willing to share with their partners is like, oh, like, I went to this like 5-day thing for business, and, there was this guy that was there, and he and I, we kind of had chemistry, and it was really nice. And, we had a really good connection. And that's what a lot of people are terrified to share with their partners. So what I'm going to share is way radically, massively more intense than that. And so if you're afraid of that, hopefully this will give you the balls to show up and actually speak the truth radically with your partner. So the next example that I'm going to give, so that same man that I had fallen in love with, he and I continued to have a certain amount of a relationship over about a year and a half's time period. Even while like I was still with my husband and I were okay. We were working through whatever like the massive heartache was that when I came and actually told him that I had fallen in love with this other man. And after that, like I just kind of kept stepping forward in knowing like I need to actually be able to kiss this other man on the lips, which was like a massive, a breaker of, that was definitely one of our boundaries that we had set up before. And so I just, I showed up and I said, I'm going to be seen, I don't know, I think it was like maybe 4 or 5 months after the Tantra retreat, we were going to be in the place where this man lived. And I was like, I feel like I need to actually be able to kiss this man on the lips. And that was radical. And my husband just said, okay, I accept that. And, do what you think that you have to do, experiment with what you have to experiment with. And I'm going to be here, I'm going to be here. And so he pretty much like kept opening up and opening up and opening up and allowing the reins out and out and out. And the more that he did that, this is fascinating. And this is exactly why I want to share this with you, is the more that I told the truth and showed up radically as myself and told him exactly what was going on and what I needed to experiment with for my self-expression at that moment, every time that he showed up and said, okay, like I trust that this is what you need to experience right now and I'm going to be here. Mind blown. Like it was radical for me to have someone show up like that in my life. Now, another piece that I will talk about after I share this next piece is where I was at in terms of shadow with all these things that were happening. But the thing that happened after that was even more severe. And essentially I pushed like all of the possible boundaries in terms of like physical boundaries that my husband and I had agreed on. Not all of them. I came about that close to pushing like the final last straw, essentially, I guess you could say, which would have been like literally having intercourse with this man. And I'm feeling some stuff come up in my heart around this, and that's probably around where I was at in terms of shadows. So this man and I had an insane energetic connection. Like I literally, when I was in bed alone, like I could energetically feel this man in the room with me. It was that kind of like insane, intense whirlwind kind of, I wanted to say romance, but it wasn't a romance. It was something else. It was an entanglement, I think, that neither of us could really kind of like pull out of, because it was so intense. It just kept pulling us back like magnets over and over and over again. And so when this happened, again, the same thing, like that same day I called my husband. He was actually not even in the same country as me. He was in Costa Rica. I was in the United States. And I called him and I said, look, this is what happened. This is what happened. I'm not even going to make excuses. I'm not going to pretend that it didn't, like, whatever you need from me around this, like, just tell me. And essentially that came forth. And again, like, of course he had to go through his own process around that. But just the fact, like, over and over and over again, he just kept telling me, like, thank you for telling me the truth. Like, you could have so easily, hid this from me. You could have so easily, like, been terrified of, like, what I was going to think or what I was going to do, or of losing me. And you could have just, like, like not told me, like easily. I was in another country, like he would have never found out, but I would have known. And I think that that's the piece, and that's what I'm feeling around my heart, actually. This is interesting. I've never seen it like this. The analogy I always used to use was, when you don't tell your partner the radical truth all the time, you're creating walls instead of windows or openness between the two of you. And what I just felt is, if I kept that from him, I would have been building this like really hard shell around my own heart, because I wouldn't have been honoring where I am at and loving myself, even when I make mistakes. And my lack of willingness to share with my partner something or tell my partner the radical truth is actually, wow, this is fascinating. I've never looked at it like this before. People talk about self-love a lot, and I poo-pooed that idea for, quite some time, but it's interesting that when I am not, this is exactly what I'm feeling, is if I had had these experiences and made these choices and taken these actions and then not told my husband, my heart would have massively hardened. Maybe that's why there's so much heart disease in our world, right? Because the arteries harden, the heart itself, like viscerally, feels the impact from this. This is so fascinating. When you create more distance between yourself and your full-on self-expression, and between yourself and your loved ones, what viscerally happens is that the heart hardens, right? And so actually speaking the truth softens your heart, opens your heart, both to yourself, because you're admitting to yourself, like, I did this thing, I fucked up. How is this actually showing me something that I really need to see? What is this communicating to me? What is it that I needed to have happen in this experience so that I could learn the lessons that I needed to learn and actually like really fucking unfold and spiral in my own axis and have this ability to show up for myself fully in every moment without questioning. Because this is another piece, right? We question ourselves all the time. There's like this matter of trust that also flows over into our partner, right? I'm going to get into like a completely new spiral here with this. of trusting. Like, do I trust myself enough to show up and know, okay, this thing happened, and then trust that what I experience, what I choose to do, is what I need to choose to do? Because so many people are constantly telling us like, oh, you can't trust yourself because you have all this conditioning and you have all this baggage and you have all this stuff. And does shadow guide our actions? A lot of the time, especially if you haven't done shadow alchemy, fuck yeah, your shadow is pretty much running the show most of the time until you go through the process and actually alchemize all of that. However, your soul encoded you both with the light and the shadow. And so the shadow is actually there to generate. It can be really generative if you're willing to say like, okay, I see, I did this. What can I learn from this? And show up again and show up again and tell the truth and trust your partner. What could happen? What could be generated in your heart? And even like I'm in this moment, I'm feeling like the heart has one of the most intense, that's not the word I'm looking for, one of the most powerful toroidal fields of anything in your body. Like you have this toroidal field that's around your entire aura, right? But your heart creates the coherence in your body. And what I'm feeling right now, which I haven't actually, when I got on this call, I had no idea that this was what was going to be coming through, is that the toroidal field, the gravity of that, the spin of it, the spiral of it, the coherence of it, every time that I show up and speak the truth, the tone of truth carries its own consciousness. And showing up to my partner and speaking the truth solidifies my relationship, solidifies my own heart's toroidal field, solidifies the coherence that is happening between the two hearts that are speaking, between my heart and my partner's heart. And if I can solidify that coherence, oh baby, there is nothing that can actually break that bubble or pierce that bubble. It is an incredible fortifying force that is unlike anything you have ever known in your life, in your relationships in the past. Codependence cannot even, like, it's completely on a different playing field than this. This is like the two hearts are hearing the truth and they're able to communicate. When you're speaking the truth with your words, it creates a cyclical thing that happens between your words and your partner's heart and your heart. And it creates this incredibly generative field that is just ripe for the picking of creating the kind of intimacy that most people long for. Like, I yearned for that intimacy for years. And I thought I didn't, and this is cycling right back to what I was talking about before. I yearned for that intimacy for years, and I was holding the belief that I did not have that intimacy with my husband. And that was why I actually felt pulled into this vortex with this other man, because I was running the story. I had this narrative in my head that I did not have that kind of intimacy with my husband. And it's fascinating. Holy shit. I have never, ever had this realization before. Only through sharing this with you am I starting to understand this transformative power, that me having these engagements with this other man was the vehicle. It was my soul's way of using shadow, because it was definitely shadow, the reason that I was reaching out to this man, because, as I said, I felt like I was lacking the intimacy that I wanted in my own partnership. And so the way that played out is that my shadow used that as a vehicle. This is fascinating. Oh my God, this is so juicy. It used that as a vehicle to show me the way to create more intimacy with my husband. It utilized this infidelity. It's really not at all what happened. Yeah, I'm just gonna erase that word from there. That's not a true word around what happened. My soul was using this shadow as a vehicle to unlock the codes and allow me to use this experience and what was happening to actually speak the truth to my husband, so that we could utilize this experience to create a more coherent field between us that actually, oh my God, that actually allowed us to create the intimate field that would build up what I thought was lacking. Wow. And so me asking him for open relationships, and me falling deeply in love with this other man, and me having, all of the experiences that I had with other men, even while we were still in a relationship together. was about me showing up and really speaking the truth to him so that we could create a coherent field in our toroidal fields and this feedback loop that actually would allow the creation of the intimate relationship that we have now. Mind blown. So there you go. Three massive examples of how I showed up and spoke the truth. Oh, now you're maybe going to want to hear, can I think of an example of where I was willing to hear the truth? Because that was the other thing that I was speaking about, right? Like when we're creating this dynamic, it's like not only hearing the truth, it's also speaking the truth. It's not only speaking the truth, it's also hearing the truth, right? Do I have an example of that? I mean, yeah, in that same experience, what I wanted to, in both of those times, what I wanted to hear was like, when I told him, I wanted him to like immediately accept it and say like, oh baby, like everything is okay and whatever, like, because I felt like, oh my God, this is gonna end it. Like I was like in terror and panic and anxiety, to a certain extent. The other part of me just knew like, this is what I have to say. But when he showed up and spoke to me like, I need to not talk to you, not hear from you, like I don't want to know anything about you for the next 6 days while I'm going to be away, like do not try to contact me. That was really hard for me to hear. That was like excruciating. Those 6 days were excruciating because I pretty much was convinced that our relationship was going to end at that moment. And I accepted it. I fully, like, I took it to heart and I said, if that's what you need, I honor that. And so it's amazing how our relationships and even our shadows, this is fascinating, even our shadows, if we allow them to do the work that they are doing, they will open up opportunities for us to get exactly what we want and see exactly what we want and then work on the shadow, because that's the next piece, right? Like being open to hear and bring into coherence what has been out of coherence instead of staying in that same dynamic. So this is the piece, like I could have continued, like even after the thing that happened with this man, I could have continued to get into other relationships. And yet I could see there was a moment when I realized like, oh, okay, that's actually not serving me. And it's not serving what I actually want, which was an intimate, like a really deeply intimate relationship. I realized like when I'm dividing myself in this way and like falling in love with other men and exploring with other men and etc., that's actually not serving what I truly desire, which is like a full-on intimate relationship. And so when I saw that, I was like, okay, even though I still to some extent had the narrative in the background of like, oh, I'm not getting the kind of intimacy that I really want from my husband, or there are certain things that I feel like are still mixing in our sex life, or etc. Even though those narratives were still there, I said, okay, I can see that actually did not serve me, and it opened up doors between me and my husband. So let's try a new experiment and let's close the relationship again, become, exclusive in the ways that we choose, and see where that takes us. And that has opened up a whole other universe of intimacy that I never even dreamed of when I thought that I wanted an intimate relationship. So there you go. Speak the truth. You're speaking to the person's, you're not so much speaking to the person's ears. You are speaking directly to their heart. And only in that way can this cycle be created and generated of creating like a bubble and a feedback loop between your two hearts. Because when you're speaking illusion, you're speaking white lies, you're speaking what you think that your partner wants to hear, that's being chopped. The head is being chopped off. The lines are being either cut off or completely entangled and confused between your hearts. This has been fun. Totally took a trip down the rabbit hole that I was not anticipating. I love that. I love that I can get on here and go into that with you.